Hello, I'm Dr. Andrea Roberts, Director of the Texas Freedom Colonies Project.
And I'm Natalie Franz, Assistant Director of the Texas Freedom Colonies Project.
We're here to talk to you about the Texas Rural African American Heritage Grant. There are many endangered African American cultural sites and historic buildings, especially in rural Texas, and you'll find them all over our atlas, which contains histories, images, and stories of settlements and their endangered properties. We're committed to expanding access to the resources needed to preserve these places and structures.
That's why we're pleased to announce that Preservation Texas has created an opportunity to restore buildings via a grant program funded by the Paul Brune Historic Revitalization Grant from the National Park Service. While we're not the grantors, we're happy to support applications by helping people understand historic preservation rules and regulations and the roles that documentation play. Which properties qualify for this grant? Eligible buildings must have served an African American community or institutional use, such as a church, lodge, school, or similar building, be owned by a nonprofit organization or municipal or county government or a unit thereof, and be endangered because of structural and physical issues. Further, eligible buildings must be located in a rural community, which is defined as having a population fewer than 50,000 people, and it must be listed on the National Register of Historic Places prior to the completion of the project. So what is the National Register of Historic Places, and why is it important?
The National Register of Historic Places is a list of sites that have historical, architectural, cultural, or archaeological significance. Buildings, structures, sites, objects, and districts are eligible for this designation. Of the more than 96,000 properties listed, only 2% represent African American heritage. More representation of African American heritage is important to preserving Black structures and settlements.
Significance is the importance of a place. There are 3 levels of significance: national significance, state significance, and local significance. Local significance means that a property is evaluated in the context of its local community, and it's important because it reflects the trends or events that impact history at the local level. Most properties on the National Register are listed at the local level of significance. The criteria for significance are: Criterion A, is the property associated with events, activities, or developments that were important in the past? Criterion B, is the property associated with the lives of people who were important in the past? Criterion C, is the property associated with significant architectural, landscape history, or engineering achievements? This is often thought of as an architecture criteria, but it doesn't mean that something has to be architecturally designed or high style. Properties that embody the hallmarks of a type, period, or method of construction are considered under this criteria. This is the most commonly used criterion in the National Register and has many subcategories under which to evaluate properties. And finally, Criterion D. This is for a site that has yielded or may be likely to yield information important to history or prehistory. It's often thought of as an archaeological criteria, but it's not limited to those kinds of resources.
There's actually another dimension or type of significance known as traditional cultural significance. A traditional cultural property is a property that is eligible for inclusion in the National Register based on its association with the cultural practices, traditions, beliefs, lifeways, arts, crafts, or social institutions of a living community. TCPs are rooted in a traditional community's history and are important in maintaining the continuing cultural identity of the community, such as a church, where there have been decades of events or homecomings held. Among the special considerations that go into determining whether or not a property is eligible are churches, which qualify if the main reason that they're significant has to do with their architectural or artistic distinction or historical importance. And if it's not 50 years old, this is usually the ideal, but they're not considered eligible unless it is of exceptional importance. And buildings that have moved. A building removed from its original location qualifies if its significance primarily for architectural value or if it's the most important surviving structure associated with a historic person or event. It is the ability to convey is what integrity is. So there's several ways of thinking about integrity, which are listed here. But the important question that integrity answers is how much of the building is the same as it was during the period that it was historically important. So, what is a determination of eligibility? That's the decision that a property meets the National Register criteria for evaluation, although the property is not yet formally listed on the National Register.
You may ask, if the property has a Texas Historical Commission marker, is it already on the National Register? What if the site is a recorded Texas Historic Landmark? Is it already on the National Register? The answer is probably not, but you may have much of the information needed to determine eligibility. You can check if your property has a marker in what kind or a designation in what kind on the Texas Historical Commission Atlas. Does listing in the National Register impact my property rights? The answer is not really. It places no restrictions on what a non-federal owner may do with their property, up to and including destruction. An important note is that a stipulation of the Texas Rural African American Heritage Grant is that building owners must agree to grant a conservation easement to Preservation Texas. National Register listing does not lead to public acquisition or require public access, and National Register listing does not automatically invoke local historic district zoning or local landmark designation.
In the application, be prepared to describe the building and physical changes over time, an overview of the property's history, the building's significance to African American history in Texas, the current condition of the building, and also provide photographs of the exterior, interior, and historic photos if available. It's important to understand that this is the preliminary application, which is the first step in the application process. Preliminary applications are due January 4th. Questions? We ask that you contact Evan Thompson, Executive Director of Preservation Texas, should you have questions about the application process. To apply, go to preservationtexas.org/rural grant. These applications are due January 4th. Thank you.